All right, good afternoon, everyone. We will convene the regularly scheduled Hutchinson Utilities Commission meeting, May 27th at 3 p.m. First on the agenda, any commissioners have a conflict of interest to declare?
None.
None noted. All right, consent agenda. Approval of the minutes and ratification of payment of bills. Anyone have anything they want to pull out of there?
I'm good.
We'll entertain a motion.
Motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
Motion by Monty and second by Matt. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that'll take us right into agenda item number 3, approval of the 2018 financial audit presented by Brenda Parsley. Floor is yours.
Well, I've been on this audit before. It's been a couple of years, but it's kind of fun to come back, and thank you guys for allowing me to present it instead of Justin with him having some National Guard duties that he had to do. Also like to start off by saying thank you for allowing CDS to perform the audit again this year, and thank you to all the hard work and time that the staff put in to help the audit go smoothly, especially in the midst of this pandemic, and I hope everybody is staying safe. And then there was a financial statement and a management letter, and this PowerPoint will just highlight some of those key parts. So the first part is the independent auditor's report. This is what you hired us to do, and it gives the end result of our audit. It also outlines the responsibilities of the commission and CDS. Ultimately, the financial statements are the responsibility of the commission, and our responsibility is to express an opinion based on our audit. The audit was conducted in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards and government auditing standards, and performed to obtain reasonable assurance that they're free from material misstatement. We can't give absolute assurance because we can't test every transaction. And it is, in our opinion, that the financial statements are presented fairly. And then here's just some pages of some required supplementary information. Looking at the statement of net position, both the current and restricted assets are down about $1.8 million from 2018. This is just the net result of capital asset additions and debt payments exceeding operating revenues. And your capital asset additions are up about $800,000. This is for work on the units 6 and 7, and then various equipment purchases and upgrades that happen throughout the year. Looking at the liabilities, that's there was a decrease in accounts payable. Last year there was some generator payment items in there, and the decrease in long-term liabilities is just as debt payments were made according to the schedule. Looking at your net position, it's kind of the net effect of everything that's gone through the commission. This has continued the trend of an increase. This trend has been experienced the last several years, and then it'll be looked into later as well. Looking at your cash and investment balances, looking more specifically at the restricted, you can see it peaked in 2017. This was as a result of the debt proceeds for the generator project. This dropped in 2018 as money was used for the project, and then with the project being completed, you can see it's a little bit higher in 2019 than it was in 2016, just with the new debt restrictions on that. And then the designated cash is driven by the payment in lieu of taxes and the rate stabilization. Overall, a healthy cash balance. The statement of revenues. Operating revenues are down about $1.1 million. This is a decrease in both divisions, and it's kind of a combination of pricing changes and some spikes that happened in 2018. And then just noted that overall items remain fairly consistent in 2019 from 2018. There was a larger decrease or increase in purchase power and gas, which was a majority of the reason for the decrease in operating expenses. This is offset by increases in administrative and general and the contributions to the city. The decrease in purchase power and gas is in line with the decreased sales, and it's because you're producing, or you're buying more than you're producing. Looking a little bit closer at the electric division, it almost broke even with operations in 2019, but there was a decreased net position due to the interest expense on the debt, which you can see more on this slide. Overall, it's been pretty consistent from 2016. The max change between 2016 and 2019 was a little over 100,000. So not a lot of volatility, which is good to see. Although it would be good to see that as a positive. I'm not gonna claim to be an expert on what these rates and if they're good or not, but they're pretty consistent in 2018, so. For the natural gas, again, produced an operating income in 2019. There was an increase in operating expenses, which was the same reasons I mentioned earlier with the administrative in general, than the contributions to the city. And then this shows that the rates being charged are sufficient enough to cover both operating costs and the interest on the debt, and still be able to build up a reserve for future capital improvements. And again, I'm not going to claim to be an expert on this. Then professional standards require that certain items be communicated at the completion of the audit. The first is on accounting practices. This is management's responsibility, and it's in note 1 of the financial statements. There are no difficulties encountered. All corrections were approved and posted by management. There are no disagreements with management. Management has provided a letter stating that all essential information was provided to us for the audit. There were no management consultations with other accountants to our knowledge. This would be similar to obtaining a second opinion or a second audit. And lastly, any discussions with management prior to the audit is not a condition of hiring or retaining us as your auditors. We have some general recommendations, and the first two shouldn't be anything new. The first is on the cross-training. We just recommend that you continue to your efforts to cross-train in order to ensure a smooth flow of information in the event of an extended absence of a key personnel. And then the second is on the capital asset accounting. The software that the commission uses for the bookkeeping has a capability to maintain the listing and records of the capital assets, and we can't stress the importance of taking advantage of the software's ability to do this. And then the last one is on GASB number 95. So due to COVID, they have delayed the implementation of certain GASBs, some by 2 years and some by 18 months. This includes the lease standard, and to my knowledge, the commission doesn't do a whole lot for leasing at this time, but it would be good to keep in mind for future that all leases, not just the capital ones, will have to be put on the books on the financial statements. I would just recommend that you keep this in mind in case you decide to finance with a lease in the future. And as always, CDS can be and is available to help with that. Is there any questions or comments?
Any questions? Anthony, could I have something?
Yeah, I did actually. I'm looking for it. You know me well, Don. I believe my question was on the balance sheet. There was a prior period adjustment made to 2018.
Oh, that was to put on the OPEB liability, the
Say that
other
again?
post-employment benefits.
Okay.
I was putting that on there last year.
Okay. That was my only question.
It was an easy one, I knew the answer.
All right.
And then mine and Justin's contact information is on there.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Anything you want to touch on or add, Jeremy? Jared?
I was just going to touch on more for when you look at some of the stuff that was in that slide on the revenue per kilowatt hour and the MCF cost per kilowatt hour. I just wanted to highlight, if you look at those numbers as an indication of the glide paths that we're on, you know, we put those glide paths in place for the electric division, a 6-year glide path, and then the gas, a 9-year. So I put together my own data, but if you look at these slides that are in there, you can see it's doing what it's supposed to be. So if you look at, again, I use the residential side of things, when you look at revenue per kilowatt hour, it's at 10.58 cents now, where the prior year was 10.31. And so that should give you guys an indication that those glide paths that we've set and those rates are doing what they're supposed to, both on the electric side and the gas side. The reason I just want to bring it up to you is that's another conversation that we've talked about in the past, that as we start moving into the summer here, those are some conversation points that you guys will need to keep in mind, is do you want to continually move down those glide paths, you know, in the electric division, the gas division, moving forward. Again, we're in year 2, we've implemented 2 years of the 6-year glide path on the electric side and 2 years of the 9-year glide path on the gas. So again, the point I'm trying to stress is it's doing what we've intended it to do based on the cost of service study. We're starting to equalize out a lot of those different classes, where maybe they weren't paying their fair share, now they're starting to move that way. And then on the flip side, if some have overpaid or they're paid more than their fair share, we're starting to ratchet that down. So just wanted to highlight that piece in there for more of a strategic planning kind of standpoint of where the board wants to be with those glide paths moving forward. So again, we implemented those October of each year, so I would say by August, the end of August, if we want to do something here, continually move down those glide paths based on the cost of service study, we'll want to have something in front of the board for consideration so that there allows at least the month of September to go in front of the council for any ability for them to, again, veto those glide paths. So just keep that in mind, and we'll touch more about it as we start talking more about strategic planning, but I just wanted to highlight that piece in the numbers. That's a good way to show you guys how the things are moving relative to the classes. Otherwise, nothing really out of the ordinary on the financials. I think you guys have seen them on a monthly basis. Ended up where we anticipated to be with cash balances in the balance sheet and some of our restricted cash, and so I think things are well from that side. Some of the areas where there was some growth, admin in general, that area was up a lot with the IT side of things. You know, we added the SCADA system was a big thing that we put in this last year in 2018, surveillance, a brand new system. So there was increased IT costs there. We also had $80,000 budgeted for the RTUs or some of the equipment out in the field. And so when you look at that couple $100,000 increase for 19 over 18, that's because of the new SCADA system and the equipment to start transitioning us to an updated software system for our brains of the operation, which you guys approved a while back. So that area was the biggest reason in that area why there's an increase in admin in general. And then some of our insurance went up. With some of our boiler insurance and some of our just property insurance. As we add more property value in generators, we end up paying more insurance for those things. So that area was a part, and then in some of the other areas, a lot of it was just had to do with some of the benefit increases in labor costs. But overall, operationally, if you take out the labor and the IT and insurance piece, things were pretty flat, even in some areas with operating expense costs where there was a decrease. And so that created some of that consistency on the operating side as far as costs. That kept us with a good cash position, a good financial position for the year. So again, nothing out of the ordinary you guys haven't seen, we haven't talked about, but I just want to highlight a few of those areas where we had some increased operating costs due to some of the software system and SCADA system updates. So.
Good, thank you. If there's nothing else, we'll entertain a motion to approve the audit.
Move to approve?
I'll second it.
Motion by Anthony and second by Bob. All in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. All right, financial statements. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Enjoy the next weather.
Thank you.
Thanks, you too. Stay safe.
Jared, you up, or is Jeremy gonna take care
Yeah, I
of it?
think I mentioned it. I don't have a whole lot. Now, the gas was pretty similar to April of last year, as you can see. Electric's down a little on revenue. Half of that was just because we didn't charge a power cost adjustment this year, so that was roughly half of that 200,000. I'll mention sales for resale. It won't be in May, but June, the Rice Lake utility contract will start, so that'll tick up a little bit. And then on the investment side, just to let you know, it'll still be Cetera we'll be using for investments, but we started working with Zephyrus here in town as Tim Johnson left Home State Bank's area, and they just kind of transferred our stuff over to Zephyrus. So just an FYI on that. That's all I have.
I guess related to the financials, I sent Commission a couple things as far as load, where the loads have been, and then kind of just give you a general summary of where accounts receivable balances are. Any concerns, any questions on any of that information I sent out? Again, kind of was going to mention to you guys at the last meeting, April was going to give us a better indication of where our loads are going to be with a full month of closures and things in town, and it's trending where I anticipated to be on the overall load, about 4% down for the month of April. It's tracking that way for May as well. I haven't got the final numbers all the way through May, but it's looking that way with some of the latest weekly forecasts I got from Dan. Again, residential load is up. The commercial side obviously is down with a lot of the closures. And then the industrial load, you know, that fluctuates up and down. I don't think that's so much attributable to the COVID-19 as it is what their production is and what their manufacturing and supplies. Some weeks are up significantly, and then some weeks are down. So it just kind of really depends on what they're doing operationally with their lines. And then HEITDK, you know, they're constantly seeing some modest decrease in load with things going in there, not necessarily related to COVID, but just reductions of areas using for production and R&D and transitioning things. So I would anticipate us still seeing some load over time in that area on the industrial side, and you know, we're still watching those guys to see if at some point they follow the industrial class and then just the large general class. So we're going to keep an eye on that piece. But overall, again, we're in the kind of the range, 4 to 7% is what we're seeing nationally. Except for a couple of hotspot areas, New York City, they're down about 16 to 20% because they've just shut everything down and we've had a lot of hotspots. Outside of a couple of those anomaly areas, 4 to 7 is what we're seeing, and mostly in the commercial classes. So we're not immune to that piece. Still fairly stable though. And then on the AR balances, you know, we are starting to see a tick up in outstanding balances again for the people that traditionally aren't paying anyway, and you know, they're just allowing it to keep kind of going, knowing that we're not shutting them off and doing those things. So it is growing. Not, I wouldn't say it's an alarming rate at this point. We'll have a better indication from the May's numbers where those things are trending. But overall, still fairly consistent. Most people are paying their bills and things are moving forward from that regard. So we'll kind of watch that, and I'll give you guys an update. Out in the next week or so. Jared and Sue run another AR report for May, and then we'll send you that information. You can see where that. Overall, fairly stable still. So I did hear a little bit on the bond rating side as well. Said I had a meeting with the 3 big rating agencies, and they said for the most part, 88 to 90% of the public utilities are still showing a stable economic outlook. So that was good, even though there's some of the stuff going on. Most utilities have good cash position. They're still fairly stable for the most parts. They did say in a couple of areas where there's more smaller utilities, they've given them a negative outlook just because they don't have the commercial base or the cash flow or the liquidity in their organizations. It's basically a pass. Whatever they collect, they turn around and have to pay their bills. So they've given some of those smaller utilities kind of a more of a negative outlook moving forward. But overall, generally speaking, from the rating agencies, again, which really impacts if you're going to issue new debt, still fairly stable and fairly economically viable. So that was a good thing to hear. I thought there'd be maybe more of a negative kind of foresight with the public utility side, but at this point, they're all staying in still a stable industry, stable environment. Even though they understand some of the loads are down, some customers' ability to pay are down, it's still a stable outlook. So that's important for you guys to know from a bond rating side, kind of where things are at, even though we don't issue a whole lot of bonds traditionally. It's still, they're optimistic even through the pandemic. So.
Good. Any questions there? Do you know if Upiner's still planning on their ramp-up plan? Has this affected them at all?
On what?
Upiner, on their growth plans?
They haven't really said lately on that piece. You know, they are hiring out there. I know that their production is still going on multiple shifts, but it's the last thing I heard that it didn't impact them. The piece that I would see maybe would impact them is just on lead times to get the equipment out there, more so than the staffing side of things. But their load is still constant out there. We haven't seen any real dip in their load production out there, so they're still heavy in manufacturing and in production of their products out there. So we're not seeing anything at this point. So.
It didn't seem like much concern on the receivable side. Seemed pretty minimal.
No, I mean, we had anticipated some of the receivable balances going up, on that piece. I'd be more concerned if we had, 99% of our people were typically paying and now we're at 80. But it's the people that typically weren't paying anyway that we're always constantly dealing with. They're the ones that just allowing the balances to grow. Usually the shut-off would force people to come in and make some payment arrangement or pay something. And now they know that we're not shutting them off, and we may not have the ability to do that for a while, and so some of those things are going. On the commercial side of things, we're not seeing a whole lot of that, where people just, commercial businesses aren't paying. I think they're trying to pay where if they can. We're not getting people calling and saying, hey, we need to set up a payment plan or some type of budget arrangement, because we're running into an issue in the commercial side of things. So we're not seeing a real big issue there at this point. And then on the residential side, it's still a high collection rate on that side. So it's just the ones that have the outstanding balances are just growing.
So if someone is not able to pay their bill, but wants to attempt to try to figure something out. We do have payment plans available for them and things in place to accommodate.
Correct. Yep. So, and a lot of that still is up in the air with at the federal and the state level as far as the mandates and what they're going to request or not request public utilities to do, not only public, but even us, talking about investor-owned utilities and co-ops of that nature. On that, there's still some rumblings about mandating utilities not going through the collection process until the pandemic is over, and then, there's different numbers out there. It's 90 days, 180 days, a year type of thing. They've been able to, we've been kind of lobbying it at the state level here that you don't need to impose mandates on utilities. We're already voluntarily doing that. We're not shutting people off. We're working with customers, who just can't pay. So now it's kind of moved, at least a lot at the state level, is do you put a timeline on that where, hey, you have to give them at least a year to repay the outstanding obligation, or 3 years, or whatever the case may be. So now it's kind of shifted towards, when you're working with them, how much time do you have to give them to pay back? But nothing's really been formalized yet. The federal level, it kind of goes up and down. There's a lot of discussion about that, and then it kind of gets halted. A lot of the bigger national associations are basically trying to say to the government, hey, most utilities are working with their people. They'll, at least in the municipal sector, try to work with people where they can. But they also have to recognize that utilities are going to go through some hardships too. People aren't going to be, they're going to be collecting their money in a timely fashion, or their loads are down, so they're getting kind of the double whammy. People aren't paying, yet loads are down, so they're losing revenue that way. So they're reluctant to put anything in place yet, but that is still a conversation point at the federal level, and so we'll kind of see where that goes in that piece. But we've always had a budget plan here, and always have wanted to work with customers if they call in. We have been accommodating. We've extended payments. We've restructured payments. If someone calls and says, "Hey, I can make my $20 a month," as long as you hold to the agreement that you've agreed upon, we've been super accommodating here, and so we work with everyone as much as we can to get some type of payment without having to shut them off. So.
That's appreciated, and I know it's needed right now. So glad we don't have to make a lot of internal changes to work with our people. Any other question on the April financial statements? Entertain a motion to approve the April financial statements.
So moved.
Second. Motion by Matt, second by Monty. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next brings us to the open forum. I do not see any visitors here today. And communication. Matt's not with us today. Divisions. Jared, do you have anything else you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I can just mention on that fixed asset you just talked about, I went live on that yesterday, so we should be good. Unless, like I said, some of all the old stuff on there, when it was kept track before I started, just calls it like 1992 edition, so we don't know what a lot of that stuff is, so I could still see an auditor making a claim on all that old stuff, but as far as the module, that's working.
So
I'm a little less comfortable with the way inventory's gone, but I'm making progress this week on that too.
So what makes you uncomfortable about that?
Just that's why this audits have taken so long, why it's been May instead of the normal March, is trying to reconcile inventory through their software.
Okay.
Otherwise, we'd have probably been done. We'd had this audit March if it wasn't for that again this year, because I was pretty much done with everything the end of January other than that.
Okay. Next year, do you think that'll go faster?
It's my hope, but I thought it'd go faster this year, so.
Okay.
That's the question we have every year.
Since we switched softwares, yeah, it's been an issue.
Okay. All right. Mark, anything to share legal-wise?
No.
Jeremy, back to you then.
A couple other things. There's a couple other pieces of literature I sent out to you guys in the business updates. Wasn't sure if there was any questions on the power supply, kind kind of portfolio for 2019, or any of the legislative items. Anyone have any questions on that stuff?
I don't think so.
Okay, we do have it, I think Angie did post on the website, so it gives people an idea of, where our portfolio is at as far as renewables or carbon-free. So we're moving that direction. Again, I think I mentioned to you, MRS, our wholesaler, is also moving more that direction anyway, as far as carbon-free and emissions-free stuff as well. And I talked to them, I think last month, a little bit about where they think their coal plants are gonna be as far as capacity and output moving forward. So there's a constant trend moving in that direction anyway. So the more they move towards renewables and carbon-free, so do we, because a big portion of our power supply is coming from it. So we're indirectly moving that direction with them as well. On that, a couple other items. We did have the bid opening today on the 2 transformers. So they look pretty good for the most part. The disclaimer is they have to obviously go through and make sure that they meet all the bid specifications as we move forward and look at some of the load loss for the transformers. But with the big transformer, we originally had 7 bidders the first time around on April 21st, and now we have 4. We had 4 this time around. Pretty competitive pricing for the most part. Virginia, Corporation, Pennsylvania, they were all, actually Pennsylvania came down in pricing, Virginia went up a little bit in pricing. And then Delta Star stayed the same as it did the first time around, and then ABB came down in pricing too. So 3 of the 4 came down in pricing with the big transformer. And then on the side, on the small zigzag transformer, we had 5 bidders the first time and 3 this time. Delta Star stayed the same, and then the other 2 transformers, bidders came down in pricing significantly. So ultimately, if they all meet the requirements, they'll look like there will be an overall, at least bid savings of about $50,000 between the 2 moving forward. So we're assuming that they're rebidding the same type of transformer that they did the first time. So the load loss information should be fairly the same, but until they get into the specifications, we won't really know. So we projected about $850,000 in the big transformer was the estimate that we went off for the project. And so if these 2 hold true, we estimate about $850, and the 2 lower bidders are $786 and $792. So within $60,000 of what we estimated, and then the smaller one we didn't estimate, but we have that as an alternate, so we may move forward with that or not. But so now CE Power will go through and do the analysis, make sure they meet the qualifications and the bid specs, and then we'll come back to the board for with a recommendation on moving forward.
Do you think that'll be a need for a special meeting, or will that just occur in June?
Possibly a special meeting, depending how fast CE Power can get through on the bids. It may be, if we can't get together until the 3rd week, then we must just push it out to the normal meeting. But if they can get it done within the next week or 2, maybe sometime mid-June, we would kind of move forward. Dan did tell me today that he was working with GRE on the capacitor bank stuff, and they just solidified a bid for a smaller transformer than the big one that we're moving up here, or that we're looking to put up here, and they said that's a 39-month lead time. So
39?
10 months, which they thought was fairly long for the size of transformer they're looking to put in.
Do you say 3 to 9 or 39?
39 months.
Wow.
Where do they come from, generally?
Well, they're built from scratch, so some of them are within the United States, some come from overseas, but these things, it takes that long to procure all the materials and the oils and things, and then build it to the specifications. So that's a problem with a lot of these large transformers, or just general transformers. They're not inventory items, so they build them based on specs, and depending on where you fall in the pecking order, I don't think it takes a real long time to build. I think it just depends on how fast the throughput is on the manufacturing facility floors and pushing those things through.
So we were thinking we'd have this thing installed next year.
Yeah, so we're still looking at, Dan and I were just talking, even we were thinking 9 to 12 months out, where this is going to be probably for sure a 2021 project by the time the big stuff gets put in. We'll still do the site prep. We're still thinking the site prep and all that stuff in the fall. So him and I talked a little bit about logistics moving forward as well on this. But so we can do some of the site prep and get the stuff ready for the transformer to come next year. You know, the biggest portion of it won't be done until next year, which is what we anticipated from what we're hearing. But we'll get a better idea once we award bids of really how quick the lead times will be. So I still think we're going to be in that 9-10 month range, probably. Hopefully it's not further out, but we talked a little bit about some of the concerns that we had. But there's ways that we can mitigate that as well moving forward. So I talked to Dan a little bit about that this morning. He also mentioned on the capacitor bank side that probably because there's lead times on on the capacitor bank itself now, some of the stuff going on with the pandemic. Jerry essentially told him that this project probably won't be wrapped up until May of next year either. So, you know, they'll start doing some stuff and, you know, the engineering design, but the procurement and the lead times to get the capacitor bank itself probably won't be here this year either. So that will probably be a 2021 completion date as well. So we're probably gonna have these two projects. We'll start and move along to some degree in 2020, but the wrap up won't be until 2021 on both of those. You can expect that's kind of where those things are at on those projects. Which obviously that stuff will be communicated back to MISO and to the developers and stuff. That, unless the only way that maybe would change from Jerry's standpoint is if they require them to work through the winter and try to complete the project, which means they'd have to expedite lead times on the capacitor bank, which they didn't budget and estimate the project with winter construction. So I don't anticipate that being a problem because there's usually a process flow through MISO. So we'll kind of keep an eye on that stuff, but they're not going to happen real quick. So it's something to keep an eye on, and I'll keep you guys updated as we kind of move along on some of that stuff as well. But so we did get some pretty good, again, representation of bids this time around. Hopefully they all come back as responsive bidders and we can move forward. So any questions on the bids, capacitor bank, any of that stuff? Okay. The last thing I had was just the return to work policy, or kind of the guidelines that I sent out to you guys as well. That was part of those attachments too. Just kind of want to work through that piece. Again, as of June 1st, we're going to kind of take a step back from our phase orange back to our green kind of level of response plan, where we'll have people coming back into the office. Again, we're going to still have people coming in. You know, we're eliminating the congregation areas. We're eliminating on-site contractors, vendors for most part coming in. We've eliminated our meetings. Any place where there's congregation, we're still not going to have that. People are going to come and report to their vehicles, report to their assigned staggered spots, and kind of move forward as we were prior to going to that next level. And so we've sent that out. We did talk about if we have any type of vulnerable employees or spouses at home or children or some area or issue that creates a heightened sense of issue for them, that we would look at those things on a case-by-case basis. So if someone has that, they can submit the form that Angie sent out today, and we would look at trying to address those things and accommodate those things where we can within our own policies, within the collective bargaining agreement, and then also labor laws. And so obviously we want to be sensitive to our employees that maybe have some situations or issues that cause a little bit more concern or a little bit more steps to be taken from a protocol standpoint. So. And then as far as the lobby, we're anticipating opening that up July 6th. We may open that up sooner depending on when we can get some of the barriers put in place up there. So Angie's been working on looking for things not only for our customers coming into the building, but also for the workers here, making sure that we have proper barriers in place, making sure that we've got masks and different things to make the customers feel safe when they come in, but also to make sure we're protecting them and the workers that have to work with the customers on a case-by-case basis. So we've ordered a bunch of stuff. There's lead times on different things, so depending on when that stuff comes in, you know, that will dictate when we open up the lobby to people as well on that. So we'll try it, but again, this is kind of what I've communicated to employees. It's a kind of a living, breathing document. If things change, if we start getting infections within the organization, if things happen with executive orders at the federal or state level where we have to go backwards or do something different, we just all need to be ready to respond in that direction. So I think it's been well received. I think everyone's done a good job here. Everyone's been great with the flexibility and accommodating schedules and doing those things. So again, not an ideal situation, but everyone understands that everyone has their part to do in keeping a safe environment, keeping a safe co-worker relationship, mitigating things, and so that's kind of the plan moving forward as of June 1st. I know the city has started opening up some things down there already, and so we'll try to mirror and kind of move that direction as well. Hopefully we can, we don't have any issues or concerns here with that as we kind of reintroduce people back in the workplace here. So.
As you introduce that concept, did your managers hear any feedback, negative or positive, from staff?
Yeah, the biggest thing I heard from them is people were really ready to get back. They wanted to kind of get back into a little bit more of a normal routine. I mean, the on-week, off-week stuff, I think that was getting to be a lot for people. They want to be back at work, doing things. So I haven't, no one's given me a negative thing of, hey, we're fearful for our lives, or we're just scared to come back. I think people want to get back into the normal routine, is what they've been hearing from their employees, and so they were ready to come back as part of that piece. Again, we'll try to accommodate if there's a situation where someone may not. I would speculate we may have one or two employees with just family concerns or issues of, just low immune systems or things that create that issue. We'll try to work with where we can. So I am anticipating maybe one or two people. We may not, but people have been okay with the steps that we've taken, with the guidelines that we're going back into place for them. So I haven't heard any feedback. I think I've heard more of we're ready to get back to work on a consistent basis.
Is there anything not getting done? I mean, we're getting into construction season, that kind of thing. I mean, is there any, have we been able to meet demand and been able to?
Yeah, we've been able to keep up. I ask that question all the time. Is there anything that we're not getting to? I would say all the critical things that we need to get to as far as new services, those things are being put in. The construction side of things has been going well. Again, the part of the reason why I think we're keeping up on the construction side is I think the city's also reduced the construction phasing. They understand that we have to kind of minimize some of that stuff. But the new connection services, those are going in. They're taking a little bit longer under the format we're in, but we're still keeping up with the time frames that the customers want as far as hooking up meters, getting things energized, things of that nature. So we're keeping up on that. A few little areas as far as some of the maintenance side of things, we're not quite up on some of the general maintenance or some of the inspection pieces as they would want to be, because some people aren't in for a week and then they have to come back and maybe catch up. But not critical things, a lot of those things, some of those regulatory things and guidelines have kind of been lax and kind of pushed back, because all the agencies understand that all these utilities and all these people are, rotating shifts, and people are on and off, and people aren't even in. But we're farther along than I think what a lot of people are, where they just haven't had people at all introduced back by us staggering. And because a lot of our people, they can come into their vehicles and go out, and they don't even have to come into the office. They can get in their vehicle at home, get out in the field, and do their stuff when they're by themselves. So some of those areas where maybe we're a little bit behind, or we're not quite as far as we would like to be at this time on some of the inspection side, is not necessarily the work piece, but more of just juggling the work schedule with the family schedule and kids at home and those types of things. But ultimately, everything's been, as far as been communicated to me, keeping up on all the major stuff that we need to, and the construction has been going well, and meters have been going in for a lot of the apartment complexes and the senior living facilities and that stuff. And again, where we have to have 2 or 3 people on a site perform a function, PPE and those types of things are being used by people and things of that nature. So nothing has been dropped, nothing of concern that I could tell you guys today that we're running into a major issue. So things are kind of moving forward as normal, at least operationally, even though we've got the staggering of schedules right now.
Anything else? Okay. All right, that'll take us to agenda item number 7, policy. We just had some policies for review. Doesn't look like we had any changes to approve this month.
No.
And then no unfinished business, no new business.
I had a follow-up question, I think, to something we talked about earlier. Jeremy, you posed for the board to consider whether we want to continue on the glide path of the rate change. So we've implemented year 2 changes of the 6-year glide path, is that correct?
On the electric side.
The electric side? Okay.
And 2 of the 9 on the gas side.
Did we have a conversation when we decided to move ahead with the rate changes that we would do some sort of internal review and then rehab that conversation? Because I believe that's maybe why trying to recall, but I believe that's maybe why we only asked for the first 2 years approval from city council, so we could do an internal review, not a full-blown rate study. Does that sound familiar?
Yeah.
That is correct. Yeah.
What do you need, how much lead time do you need to do that internal review and analysis?
I don't need a lot because I've already been doing a lot of it. That's why I wanted to highlight in her slide presentations as just a kind of a forethought for that information that her stuff is mirroring up to what my stuff is already showing as far as the revenue that we're generating per customer class and what that's doing. So I don't need a lot of time.
So that could
To
be just
provide
a
this
general
to you.
board agenda item in the next couple of months.
So when does the city council need to approve that? Is it October?
So they would need to approve it before October 1st because we changed the rates starting October 1st. Remember, that was part of the conversation back then is changing rates either in the spring or fall when there's less load rates, so there's less impact on that change. So we've started doing October 1st when the new rates going. So we would have to have it in front of the council at the latest for one of the 2 council meetings in September. If we want to do it sooner and give them more time to look at that, I would say by the end of July,
So should we have it on the July agenda? That would
we
give
could do that, so.
them plenty of time.
How's the city council composition? Has that changed? There's one new member since 2 years ago?
You get
Right.
Besta, right?
Yeah.
Dave Sebesta would be new. So most would likely remember our conversations from a couple of years ago or easily be refreshed. Yeah, I think summer.
Okay, let's plan for July.
Okay.
Good point. Any other business, Jeremy?
That's it for today. Let's get any other questions.
Anything from the commission? We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Motion by Anthony, second by Matt to adjourn. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Sending any CDE teams to the national convention.
Okay. Don't feel bad. I don't understand many things myself, so
Yeah, it's
especially as we
It's
go
all new.
more to the electronic thing. I mean, yeah, we have a grasp of, the stuff we're doing on a daily basis, but when it comes to what we got to do this now, yeah, it can be a little confusing at times.